So yes, we're back together again. We're at chapter 6. We're going to hit and a little bit of review. We're talking about Charlie Daniels' song "Tribulation." We will talk about that as we go forward. There are people who believe that we're in the tribulation right now, but if we are in the tribulation right now, then the rapture, either it hasn't happened or it's the tribulation is the rapture is post-tribulation, and there's lots of different views of the way that is. The most logical order, as we've said before, is the chapter 1 is the resurrected Christ that God has made known to John again, and then in 2 and 3, you've got the letters to the 7 churches. So this is the church period. Remember, the 7 churches, real churches in Asia, represent in the focus on the sin or the specific of the church, represent all churches, and then also represent the church throughout time. And you can look at, for instance, the very first church that we looked at, Church of Ephesus, is no longer a church. It disappeared. And it represented the church as the church developed during the time of the apostles, during the time of Christ. And then that period was done, and that church was gone. So the other churches, as we looked at, and you remember, correspond to different epochs, different eras of our human history for the last 2,000 years. And you can look at what God has written, what Jesus wrote to those churches that was their primary problem, and then take that church with the primary problem and put it down in a period in history and see that the church in history was plagued primarily with that problem. So each one of those churches not only represent all the corruption of the church, but also very specifically represented and were a specific example of period in church history throughout the last 2,000 years of when the church suffered specific problems and pointed problems, so that each one of these letters could be applied, if one would do it, and say, oh, this letter to Smyrna is about our time. We need to fix this. But, we didn't do that globally. So then the end of the 3rd chapter is where we understand the most popular understanding of where the rapture takes place. So we are in the last of the 7 churches. We're at the period of the last church, the 7th church. And at the end of the church period, the 7th church, then there is no church. And why is that? Because at the end of the 3rd chapter, the 3rd chapter that we read, the rapture takes place, and Christ calls back all of the believers, and that's the rapture. That's the Left Behind series. That's when Charlie Daniels saying, "Tribulation, I don't want to be there. Tribulation, I don't want to be there." Because if you are one of the church, if you are one of the true believers in Christ, and the rapture happens, you get taken away. So you don't have to do the rapture or do the tribulation. You miss that. And that's the whole point of the rapture. The rapture removes the believers in Christ so that because they already believe, the tribulation is the beginning of the judgments against humankind. During the time of the tribulation, the human beings can still come to Christ. Not all over yet. But it's going to be horrible. It's going to be awful. And we're beginning in that in the 7th or the 6th chapter this evening. We got to the move from there. The witness of Revelation is no longer on earth. John is taken up into heaven. So before he's on earth and Christ is come to him, the exposure is to him here on earth. In the 4th chapter, he is taken up into heaven. So now everything happens in heaven. He's getting a glimpse of heaven. That's where we have all the business about the throne, around the throne, and the different colors, the vermilion. You remember all this? Talking about the one seated on the throne. So we're having a glimpse of the creatures around the throne, the 24 elders around the throne, the angels around the throne. So this is the 4th chapter, is all about the throne of God and the person of God and the majesty of God. Very dramatic events start to unfold for John. And then we have, as we've come to, you have the 5th chapter, This is where we started off with the scrolls. That the scroll says, then I saw the right hand of him who was seated on the throne, a scroll writing on both sides, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, who is worthy to break the seal and open the scroll? But no one was in heaven able to do that. Remember this whole thing? And then he starts to weep. And then one of the elders says to me, do not weep. See the Lion of the tribe of Judah. This is so important. The Lion of the tribe of Judah is the one that's worthy. And so John turns to see the lion and sees instead the lamb that was slain. And in fact, for the rest of the book of Revelation, Jesus will be referred to as the lamb that's slain, not the lion at all. It's the lamb that's slain from this point on, because it is the slaying of the lamb that saves everybody, not the lordship of the lion. Remember that in the Old Testament, for the Jews to follow after God, to follow God is to follow the God who is the master and the king and the power and the authority and the everything. And when Jesus came, he said, yes, but also the friend and the companion and the lover and the one by your side. And this is the one that will die for you. Who will die for someone else but the friend? Who will lay down his life for his friend but a friend? So I am this person. I am the one who's dying for you, has died for you. So for the rest of the time of Revelation, it's the lamb that was slain. It's not the Lion of Judah. Now I wanted to recount just for a minute. I know I'm moving quickly, but about the scroll. Remember, I had the picture. I had that GIF of that scroll, the really cool one with they got smaller and smaller with all the seals. So you remember that what you'd have to do is break the seal and then unroll it to read what's on it. And then when you get to a certain point, you have to break the next seal to unroll it more. And as you're unrolling it, you're re-rolling it. Right? That's the whole point. You're rolling and rolling and rolling. There are examples of these scrolls that are written on both sides. Remember I said it's extremely unusual. I said I would get back to that later on. So what was that? The scrolls that were written on both sides and were sealed with more than one seal. Could have been 3 seals, could have been 5 seals, probably not that many, but it happened. And this is why. So what you would have is you would have the title, let's say, to a property. You'd have the title to a piece of property. This is and the scroll says that you bought this property and this property belongs to you. It's your family property. Okay. But then you do something, you get in a gambling, you play poker and you bet your property and you lose. So now your property belongs to this other person because you lost it. But Jewish law provided for idiocy. It said, you can be an idiot and we will protect you from yourself because God does not want you to pay for being an idiot forever. Now, this is actually the way we treat our kids, isn't it? When our kids were young, when our kids did something wrong, they may have a short-term punishment for what they did wrong, but they're not going to pay forever for that mistake. The short-term punishment is relinquished because they fix it. They knock over the thing when they're playing with the ball. And so what do we have them do? We have them clean up the thing and then the debt's paid and it's okay. There is a condition. You have to clean up your mess in order to get your ball back. There has to be a condition for it to be turned around. God has said the same thing. This is why God put in place the year of Jubilee, when old debts are forgiven and slaves were set free. You're enslaved, you're indebted, but when the year of Jubilee comes along, all debts are blanked out and you start over again. So you don't have to pay forever. So what this did was it said, I got the deed, and on the back of the deed, outside of the paper, it would be written of what you had to do to get your property back. What you would have to pay, what would you have to perform, whatever it is. And it's written on the outside of the deed. And then the deed is sealed again, not only with 1 seal, but 2 seals or 3 seals, of your seal, my seal, and the arbitrator's seal. So now you don't have to open the deed to read a part of it, to read what must be done. To have it fully done, you would break all the seals, and then you would open up the thing and see that all the conditions were made, and you would have your property back. It would be returned to you. So now we go to this scroll, God's scroll, the seven seals. Remember, I told you that people think it's the Old Testament that's written in there, or it's the Bible that's written in there, and all this other stuff, and all that doesn't make any sense because nobody's worthy to open the seals, but we have already opened all those seals. We've opened the Bible, we've read the Bible. This is a thought to be the akin to the deed of creation, that this was lost by Adam, it was lost in the process of sin and corruption, and that there was a process and a debt that needed to be paid in order for creation to be returned, not to us, but to God, back to God as a whole and complete. That's why we have the seals that are broken, and with each breaking of each seal, an event takes place that will lend itself toward the repatriation of the property back to God, of creation back to God. So now think of that. Think of the scrolls in that way, the seals on the scrolls in that way. It's the conditions that must be met to repatriate creation to God. The problem is that
Christ is the only one who can do that.
Right. So, and there are squatters, a whole bunch of squatters in creation. That's the people. So there must be a way to deal with these people, both for their repatriation, which is God's primary intention, want, and desire, but there has to be a condition for those who will not be repatriated. So if after a period of time you meet all the conditions on the outside of the scroll, so the property is yours again, the problem is that during the 7-year period that you have not owned the property, it's not yours again. The person who has been in charge of that property has built a NASCAR garage on it, and it's a mess, and there's trash everywhere and everything else. There have to be conditions that are put in place in order to clean that property up so that you can have it back the way that it was. It's not going to be a trashed piece of property. I was just saying, well, you lost it for 7 years, so I can do what I want. No, it has to be corrected and given back to you in a way that is congruent with how you gave it up. So creation is being remade, repatriated, and the people are either repatriated with the deed back to God, or they are not. They must be dealt with. The squatters must be removed. And so now we get to the beginning of our 6th chapter. So now, who wants to read? This is so cool. But we're not gonna be able to read the whole thing. Let's read like maybe 1 through 5. That's 3 seals, and then we'll just come back and do those 3 seals. Who wants to read?
Oh, I would love to.
Okay.
I would just love to. All right, so I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. When the Lamb opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice coming from the 4 living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine.
Okay, let's hold right there. All right, so we'll go back to chapter 1. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Right, so we have the Lamb that was slain. Again, You think that now John is at the throne. John is in heaven. He's seeing the glory of the throne, the one on the throne, the spirit around the throne, and the Lamb now in the midst of the throne. And he's seeing this happen. And what he's seeing is the act of the tribulation. This is happening. The Lamb is opening the scroll, breaking the seal, and then these riders are leaving from heaven to earth, and the action of these riders are taking place on earth. So John is no longer there. The church is no longer there. The people on the earth are the ones who are not the church. The ones that have been raptured are in heaven, and would be watching on. So John's getting to see this. So okay. The Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals, and then I heard that one of the 4 living creatures. Remember, we have those creatures around the throne. They are seraphim, cherubim. They have the 6 wings. They have the different heads of the ox, of the calf, of the lion, and the eagle and the man. They match up with the 4 creatures in Daniel, the 4 creatures in Ezekiel. They're all a little different. They don't have to be the same. There's a lot of angels in heaven. We're going to hear in a minute just how many angels. In fact, we can't count them, but there's so many you can't do that. So to say that they're a little different, people get all stressed out. They say, "Oh, this is not like the same ones." Daniel talks about the apocalypse, but they're different. Yes, they're different. I'm sure there are lots of different creatures that God has. Remember that the imagery of these creatures, the drama of this is for us. The drama for this is for us. So one of these creatures says they have authority. These creatures obviously have a very specific place in the drama that's taking place. Come and call. So the creature is given the authority, the derivative authority from the Lamb, to say the word, which is enacted by the breaking of the seal. The Lamb breaks the seal, setting the thing in motion, and the creature calls, "Come." So there are some who believe that the rider of the first horse, which is white horse, right, is Jesus coming out. But that is not correct, because 1, he's breaking the seals. He's the Lamb. And 2, Jesus would not be called or commanded by a creature of the throne. It's because we want to see Jesus on the white steed doing the thing. And actually that does happen way far from now, up in like chapter 19, where Jesus is on a steed and a big white horse, but there's more difference than there is similarity. So he says, "Come," and he says, "I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest." All right. So there are hints in this verse that, believe it or not, kind of turn it around, make it go back, because the imagery here is very specific. The white horse is a horse of the white is always is the color of trust and the color of honesty and the color of truth. The bow is important because there are no arrows. In ancient times, a rider with a bow and an empty quiver with no arrows, if you showed up at a meeting with a bow but no arrows, that's not a sign of war. That's a sign of peace. You show up with a bow and an arrow, that's a sign of war. So you can cause a lot of trouble by forgetting to take the arrows out of your quiver. So he shows up, he's a rider with a bow, no arrows. So it's a peace sign. He's riding on a horse that is a peace animal. He's given a crown. Now, this is very interesting because the Greek word that's used here for crown is Stephanos. And why that's interesting is because if we look forward in a time up into 19 and look at the word that's used for crown for Jesus, it's not Stephanos, it's diadem.
Well, I think I'm confused again, I think.
Okay.
Because first of all, I'm confused why we stopped at the 3rd seal and didn't go to the 4th, because I think this is the 4th horse, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, isn't it?
It is.
And So then the first one would be war. And,
The second one is war.
Yeah.
well, the second. Well, no, which one is death then? That, is
The
it
fourth.
That's the pale horse, the fourth one.
the
Yeah, the
fourth
whole-
one? The four horsemen are, what was it? War, famine, death, and pestilence, right?
Well, depends on what book you're reading,
Okay,
because there are different opinions about the different, the particularities or the specifics of the horse. The fourth horse, I looked, it's verse 8. I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. That's the pale horse. And the rider was named Death, and Hades was with him, or hell was with him, and following close behind him. And they were given the power of over a fourth of the earth to kill by the sword, famine and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth.
oh, that's, yeah, okay, oh, I'm sorry, I see it now, and the name of him sat out was death.
Right.
But, and it's just implied that the third one is famine because of the scales. It doesn't say what the name is.
Right.
Right, because the food costs a
Yeah.
pittance of food costs the whole day's wages.
And then the doesn't really say who the second one is.
Well,
The red horse.
that one, he's killing,
The red horse is war.
his thing is getting people to kill each other.
Yeah,
Let's-
well,
Hey, if you hang with me for a minute there. Let's just do the first one, and then we'll roll. We're going to go all the way through them. I just
okay,
stopped because there's so much information here. We don't want to go too quickly, and then you know,
okay, yeah, it just seems to me that all four of them should be taken together.
we will. I mean, you're actually taking them apart right now. You're saying, well, this one's this one, and this one's this one. And this one.
Okay,
That's all we're going to do. We're just going to slow down for a minute, and then we can look at the big picture.
okay,
So this first one, so he is got a Stephanos, which is not a diadem. A diadem is a permanent crown. It is a kingly crown. It's a conquering crown. The Stephanos is the same word that's used for the crown that you would be like a laurel leaf crown. It's a perishable crown that was given to those who had achieved some great event. When the Roman officers would come back if they conquered they won the war, they won the battle, they would get a Stephanos. They would get a laurel wreath crown that would be a transitory crown. It would be one that would show them to be wonderful and did a great job, but you can't wear it all the time. It's going to wither and die and be gone away. And this was because the emperor didn't want this person to be toting around a crown. I mean, he wanted to give him something, but it was going to wear out. So we have hints here of what this person is doing. What they are doing is for a short amount of time. The crown is not going to last. They've come with a bow, and yet that is on a peace animal with a peace icon, the bow. But then it says, yet they rode out to conquer, bent on conquest. So the overwhelming majority believe that this is the first rider of the apocalypse, is the Antichrist. That the Antichrist will come. It's an echo of what's written in Daniel 9:27 and 12 following. Talks about the one who will come and deceive the people, deceive the world, will be welcomed as a peacemaker, and that there will be peace between in Israel, peace between Israel and the world. So the belief is, and there are many people believe, and this will come out in chapter 7, that this Antichrist figure is actually a Jewish figure from one of the original 12 tribes. Not a ghostly person, but an actual living person that is raised up, that will be embraced by the world as a savior, as a person that is on everyone's side. This is a well enough established understanding of the prophecy that you may not remember this, and I didn't until I remembered it again. But I remember once I reread it that there were people who were afraid that Bill Clinton was the Antichrist. way back in the day. And the reason why was because he was brokering a peace deal between Yasser Arafat, the PLO, and the premier of Israel, and it almost worked. If you remember,
Carter for all that.
yeah, it came this close. Arafat almost accepted it. He got way more than he wanted, and he turned it down. But the evangelical Christians were freaking out because they were afraid that Bill Clinton was the Antichrist, and we're all going to be like it's all going to come unglued right now. Of course, it didn't happen. So this is this figure that says that in the 7th year, according to Daniel, this figure will achieve peace. Peace will happen, but it will be a completely manipulative peace. And this, I hate to say this, but we have experience of this, don't we? Somebody who gets into power and is heralded as this wonderful person, and you find out after they're gone that they've manipulated all kinds of stuff and done all kinds of nasty stuff, and you can't turn over any more rocks without finding more stuff that they've done. So this person will have this worldwide influence, and then will be shown to be this terrible entity that's not out for peace, that's out for the lulling of the people, the opiate of the masses, to put the people to sleep and then take advantage of them and be able to further the corruption, on and on and on. At the time that this happens, this is coming to an end as the Antichrist is identified and things start falling apart, is when we have the second person of the apocalypse, the red horse, the fiery red horse. So this person is coming. I heard the living creature say, "Come," and then another horse came out, a fiery red one. The rider had the power to take peace. It's a false peace. There is a real peace on earth, but there is also a false peace. The false peace is going to provide the rich and fertile ground for war, because the promises of peace that everyone believed were true and good are actually a deception. And you know what happens, especially on the world stage, when one country says, "I'm going to do this," and they don't do it. The very next day, the other people are putting more troops on the border, and everybody's making a big show. I've got the bigger stick. I can do it. I'm going to do it. Listen to Putin. Putin's got the thing going on in Ukraine. And so what happened a month or 2 months ago, when he's not winning the war, it's not going his way. And so his ambassador goes to the UN and says, "Oh yeah, we are getting ready. We have our limited nuclear strikes already. We've pulled them out. They've got them ready." So the bravado is there, the braggadocio is there, the threat is there, and when you're like that, it's like the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Everybody's poised. Once they realize this thing has gone south, everybody gets ready, and it only takes one little spark for someone to push that button, for someone to say shoot. And when that happens, all bets are off. How many wars have started, or how many battles have started that way? Somebody has a misfire in their gun, and then everybody starts shooting because they thought it was somebody shooting at them. So this rider comes, takes peace from the earth, the illusion of peace that the Antichrist brought, and the actual peace that was being enjoyed by those that had achieved that. Peace from the earth, and make men slay each other. And to him was given a large sword. So of course, the image of the sword is the image of a death device. There's no other use for it. In fact, in the time of the mythology of King Arthur and like that, one of the great things that you would have is when you had a parley, when the men would come by to talk about peace, they would, within sight of each other, they would take their swords out and give them to their seconds, and then approach each other without their sword. It was the image of, this is a war thing, this is a thing for killing, and I'm not going to bring it to this meeting. So the rider on the second horse is the rider of war, carries the war item, is given the authority to ignite global war. So in the images of the Charlie Daniels movie, you had all those images, or that video of war. Third horse. when the Lamb opened the third seal, and I heard a living creature say, "Come." And I looked before me, and here it is, black horse.
Skip the second one, I think.
The second one was war.
Second.
Yeah, that was the
Glided
red,
over it quickly.
Oh, okay.
that was the red horse with the sword. That was the who took away the peace, the real peace, and the false peace. So the third one comes, and what happens with war? We see it happening right now. We are on the cusp of it. We are on the edge of one of the worst global famines in human history.
Yeah.
Because all that food got, who knew, right? How many of us knew 6 or 8 months ago that Ukraine produced, more wheat than anybody in the world, except for maybe the US, and that all that wheat goes to Africa and parts of Asia and to help feed all these people, and none of it was getting out. So you've got, and droughts taking place.
Route 11 ships. One of their oils is sunflower oil that they get from Ukraine.
Right.
They had this little disclaimer saying, we're not getting our Ukrainian oil. So,
Well, biggest, I think it's one of the largest exports is sunflower oil, right?
yeah, funny. I mean,
Yeah. So we didn't know that. Who knew that? And now you have this little war, I'm sorry, what is it called? Special military action, according to Putin, not even a war, going on between Russia and Ukraine. And it has devastated world food stores. And, people are dying. Thousands and thousands of people are dying, and more in tragic numbers are going to be dying soon. In fact, I heard in Somalia, because of the drought that they've been experiencing, but now because there is no food drought, no food drops, that they are moving right now within the number of weeks to a place where right now you have 1,000 people dying a day, and in 3 weeks you're going to have 15 or 20,000 dying a day. It's not an arithmetic jump; it's an exponential, to multiplying itself on top of each other. And what they're saying is that when that happens, the next thing is going to happen, and we're going to get to that in a moment. And you'll understand. It's a rider holding a pair of scales in his hands. And then I heard the voice say among the 4 living creatures, a quart, and Carolee already said this, a quart of wheat for 1 day's wages and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and did not damage the oil or the wine. So what does that mean? It is a zero-sum game. If you go back to Roman times, a quart of wheat would be the ration for a soldier who is not at war. And it is enough to sustain that man for 1 day. So you can get a quart of wheat is a portion that's been determined to say this guy can live on this, not at war, not when you've got to do anything, not when you're out there fighting and you need to have your energy. That's not it. This will just sustain you for a day, quart of wheat. But now it's changed, because this amount that's going to sustain you, you have to work for a day to get it. A day's wages for 1 quart of wheat. So the amount of food that can keep you alive for not doing anything but breathing, you now have to do everything to get. So of course, people aren't going to do everything to get it. They're going to spend everything they have for it. So you have not only famine that's taking place, but global economic disaster. And of course, we've seen this over and over again in time, economic disasters, when things like this happen. In fact, we can look at COVID and say, that was an economic disaster. We still aren't recovering. The whole world has not recovered from the disruption in the economic process that was brought on by COVID.
well, the whole 2009 collapse was caused by the cost of fuel outstripping people's ability to do anything but get fuel, and then the cost of housing also rising so that you couldn't afford to live.
Yes.
And it caused major institutions to fall apart.
So we have in our own lifetime, and I'm sad to say multiple times in a very short period, have the living example of how actually gentle and well balanced the economic process and the food process of the world is. And these disruptions can cause enormous harm, human death, political and business death, straight across the board. So now we have this third person of this third rider on the black horse of the apocalypse, whose sole purpose is to accelerate and cause the complete economic and living wreck of the world. So you have the wheat. You can't possibly earn enough. You can't possibly do enough to get this wheat, and this wheat is only enough to sustain you. It's not enough for you to prosper. There's not enough to go around. So you see how these things build on each other. Now, you're going to kill each other. I'm going to kill you for this 1 quart of wheat, the equivalent, of course, for us. Whatever's going to keep me and my family alive, I'm going to have to take from you. So war is acting in the background. The deceiver has started this off. The second rider, the red horse, has continued it by setting people against each other, which sets in motion the collapse of the economic system and the famine. The third rider furthers this along by stirring the pot, by creating a greater distress and greater need. There's lots of talking about the oil and the wine. There, the two debates over this is that the oil and the wine are also images for what is left at the altar, what is left for God. So one of the thoughts is what we're talking about here is that when he says to the writer, and do not damage the oil or the wine, that there is a prohibition against the offerings that are going back to God. So those are left alone. All right, and we did not read the fourth and the fifth, so let's keep reading. Let's see what time it is. Yeah. So who wants to read verse 7 and 8 and 9? Let's see, 7, 8. Let's read 7, 8. That's the last horse.
Yeah, I'll read that.
Okay.
When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And the power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth.
All right, so this is the third horseman of the apocalypse, as we like to call him, is the rider. This is a great movie with Clint Eastwood. If you guys have not seen it, it was early on his directing days. Very super meaning, like lots of hidden meaning. In fact, it'll drive you crazy because there's stuff that's unanswered in the movie, and you're kind of like going, well, kind of like this. And it's about a rider who arrives on a pale horse, and how he starts out as this very mysterious and very dangerous figure, and then when he goes and cleans up and comes back out to do whatever he's called to do, he's a priest, and he starts going and helping the people that are in need, and he's against the bad guys. And it's called Pale Rider. All right, so here we have the Pale Rider. One thing you may not know, that this word pale, interesting translation of this, is the word chloros. And the word chloros is the root word of the word chlorine. And it's also the word that betrays a green hue. So the pale horse is actually has a green hue. It's not a white horse or just a tan horse. It's a green horse, very light green horse, chloros horse. The rider is named Death, and Hades, or Hell, remember Hades and Hell is same, was following close behind or with him. They were given the power over a fourth to kill by the sword, the famine, and the plague. These things are already taking place, right? This is already started by the second, a member of the, set up by the first, and exacerbated by the second. Fourth,
It's like the fourth one doesn't do anything. He just is there to show you what,
I think he's
you know,
closing.
he's the reporter or something.
I think he's closing the deal. He is. This is where all these things somehow have come to an end. Like some of these events are over. Maybe the person's finally pulling the trigger on the limited nuclear arsenal. So they are, they just take out Iran. They just take out Afghanistan. They just take out Ukraine. They just take out. It's not a global destruction. It is a controlled destruction. They are given the power over a fourth to kill. Fourth of the earth. That's about that's almost 2 billion people. So in this period, 2 billion people are going to die. Now you can see again why Charlie Daniels is singing and saying, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be there. I don't want to be there. This is a really horrific, horrible picture of what is going on earth while John is given this ability to watch and see what's happening.
I wanted to add in one of the things that I read about the pale horse and it being that green color. It's because in what I read was that the green symbolized the rot that happens.
Cool.
Yeah. Rot and slime and
yeah. We paint them, and the paintings I've seen. I was going to put some up. We'll do it next time. The imagery a lot of times of the riders is very majestic. The horses are quite impressive and beautiful, and but there's a whole other genre of portraying these. So like the black rider on the black horse.
Yeah.
The horse itself is a horse of famine. It's all bony and decaying and nasty and gross. And the white horse is a little too plump. It's a little too healthy. It's a little too, beautiful. It's unnatural. And that's the way the Antichrist is, right? The Antichrist is unnatural. He's too smooth. He's too good. He's got too many answers. So I like that because it has it gives you the image that things are what they are. And if you have, of course, what Jesus says, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, you will be warned. You will know what's going on. But those who don't, I guess you paint them like they're really great looking things and put them on the wall because it's good art, right? And this is the problem of the apocalypse. This is the problem of the tribulation. Remember, we're talking about people here that are alive on earth. They're going through this stuff. Hopefully none of us, right? That they're going through this stuff because they are denying who God is, saying, no, don't believe it. Don't believe it. Don't believe any of it. I did a teaching on using the movie called The Rapture. I think I've told you about this, guys, about this a lot of times. It had Duchovny. What's his name? The guy from the X-Files.
Oh, David Duchovny.
David Duchovny. It was when he was at the top of his game at the X-Files, and he played one of the he gets killed in it late in the movie, but he plays one of the major parts in this movie. And in this movie, it's the rapture. It's the rapture and then the tribulation. And it's just a brilliant portrayal because the woman who this movie is all about, she gets to the point where she's caught up in the rapture because she's a Christian woman, but she's had a horrific, horrible, faith-shaking event take place at the last minute. And she blames God for this horrible thing. And here she is in the rapture, and God has given her, says to her, come on. And she said, no, because if you're the God who did this terrible thing, then I don't want you and I don't believe you. And so the movie ends with her just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, with her just, shaking her fist saying, no. And this is the image that Jesus has, right? This is the image that God has for us through Scripture. God is not punishing us. God is not willfully destroying these people. God does not want, remember what was the scripture we just read? There is more joy in heaven over the redemption of one sinner, one lost sheep. Jesus said, will not the shepherd leave the 29 sheep and search forever for the one lost sheep? And there'll be more joy in heaven over the return of the one lost sheep than all of the other ones who are already in the sheepfold. So this is happening. All of Revelation is happening because God is looking for the one lost sheep. And if you won't come to God when things are great, right? Remember World War I? What was that phrase that came out of World War I? In direct response to the events taking place in France. Remember what happened in France? Rene Descartes came along in France, and France became too smart for God. Didn't need God anymore. And then all these Frenchmen went off to war. And the cry that came out of World War I was all these French that arrived in the trenches that didn't believe in God anymore because they knew better. The phrase that came out of it was there were no atheists in foxholes. When everybody was getting shot at, and when everybody's knees were blown off, and when everybody was sick, and when everybody had trench foot, all these French that said they didn't believe in God were suddenly praying to God. No, there were no atheists left. Everybody said there must be a God. I'm going to pray to my God. Of course, then they went back. They went back to France, and they got all better. They got a prosthetic leg, and they got a girlfriend, and then they didn't need a God anymore. They went back to being an atheist. So God is saying, I recognize there are people that will never believe unless things get tough. And so here comes the tribulation, and things are getting tough. And there are going to be people that are going to experience the tribulation, and this is their chance, and they're going to turn to God. No atheists in foxholes. Unfortunately, there are going to be people who are still going to hold out and say, I don't believe in you. That's a strange thing to do. I'm going to look right at God who's talking to me and say, I don't believe in you. I will not accept you. I will not take you. I will not be your servant. And this happens all the time as well. I've told you before, some of the most ardent examples of people who believe in God that I've met in my lifetime are atheists that argue so passionately and emotionally that there is no God. And I'm telling you, the reason why is because they're fighting their own belief. You just don't fight that hard for something you don't believe in. And they fight, man. I've had some wild discussions with atheists that are just so emotionally wrapped up in convincing me there is no God. And I've said more than one of them. It sounds to me like, it's that old phrase, what? Methinks thou protest too much.
Mhm.
You're not trying to convince me there's no God. You're trying to convince yourself there's no God, and you want me to get on board because that's one little helper for you. All right, so we move in with this ultimate famine in earth. Even the wild beasts of the earth are now preying on the people. They don't have anything to eat. There was a time, I can't remember the period where there was a famine. It was in Europe, and the Duke in this area ordered the slaughtering of wild pigs. That not that when you come across one, you slaughter it. They would do that anyway. They would kill the pig anyway to eat it, right? But they ordered people to go out and find the pigs and kill them. Ordered his troops because the pigs were eating people. The boars were attacking and eating people, and they were finding farmers and their families eaten by the boars. So they're saying we have to go out and kill them because they're killing our people. These aren't lions and tigers. These aren't prey animals, and yet they're killing and eating the people. So the wild beasts are even going to turn against because there's nothing to eat. I wonder what a horse would do. I guess it would just die, right?
It's not going to eat. It's not going to eat.
Got the wrong kind of teeth.
But I want to step back one moment before the wild boar story and say that when you were saying the people didn't believe in God, even though all the tribulation was happening, the way I'm seeing this is all these things are happening at the same time, right? The famine, the war, and the death. And so to me, that first horse that came out with the rider, the white one, which is the Antichrist, is still also there on the scene, right? So then is it not possible that the people on earth are praying to that Antichrist, thinking that it is the Christ, and they're thinking they're going to be protected, but they're not? Do you see what I'm saying? So their
Yeah.
belief is in the wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is a chronology when we look at this with next to Daniel and the little apocalypse that's described in Daniel, and you put the two together, there's a little bit of a chronology about a progression, but they are definitely overlapping. They're not, one ends and the other one starts. There's definitely an overlap, and no doubt at all that the people are turning toward the false god.
Yeah, so it's not that all of them are saying it's you, I hate you, is that they're praying to the wrong thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Remember now, I remember when Marilyn Robertson, and some of you may remember Marilyn Robertson, came back after Bowling died, and she for 2 weeks, and she wanted to come to Adult Forum, and it just so happened that in the Adult Forum I was doing a 2-week Adult Forum teaching on Satan. And I remember when she came in and she sat down, she goes, "Oh no, I don't want to do this. I'll go do something else. I'll wait until you all are done. I'll see you in church." And I said, "Marilyn, what, you can't. When was the last time that you did this?" She said, "Never. I've never done this. I'm not interested in this." And I said, "Okay, well, you're here for a reason. You just happen to arrive for 2 weeks on the 2 weeks when I'm doing this thing. Let's, why don't you stick it out?" And, so you didn't know Marilyn, obviously, Cheryl, you didn't, but she was a deeply spiritual, deeply committed missionary in Nigeria for, I think, 40 years. And so she turned around and said, "Okay, you got a good point. I'll sit there. I'll listen to it." So she went through the first day, got up, said, "Okay, well, I'm going to wait till the second." Next week, she came back. We finished up the lesson, and when I got done, she said, "Well, I am floored. I am completely floored, because I have my whole life been saying that that the earth belongs to God. It's God's, and God's the sovereign, and God's the one, and God's taking care of it, and God's doing this, and God's doing that. And I'm wrong. This belongs to Satan. It's his." And that was my point. I just put the scripture. Satan took Jesus to the temple, right? And he said, "Listen, I'm going to give you the whole world. I'm going to give you this whole world. And you can do whatever you want. You just have to get down and worship me."
Mm-hmm.
And what did Jesus say? He didn't say, "Oh, you're wrong. You don't own this world. I own this world. Dad owns this world. This is our world. I created this world. I spoke this world into being. It's mine. You liar." He didn't say that. He said, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." He did not dispute the fact that the world belonged to Satan. The province and the ability to rule over creation was deeded for that period of loss to Satan. Satan has the upper hand. Satan has control. We get to see that every single day.
Yep.
This whole process is the taking back of what belongs to God after this lost period, breaking these seals, reading the conditions on the outside of the seal of the scroll, and fulfilling those things, and taking back what belongs to God, repatriating that which belongs to God, and returning it the way that it was when it started, now even better, and trying to reclaim the people at the same time. So this is talk about an info war. This is a real process of trying to get through not only the corruption that we all suffer from, but then the compounded corruption of Satan, trying to obscure any kind of road or avenue to God. This is why, remember in the Gospels, when the demons came, they said, "What do you want from us?" There was an immediate. It's a wild thing to think about, that the ones in the scripture who knew the Son of God at the first contact were all demons. They were the ones that immediately were in relationship with him. They didn't have any doubt. There was no gray area in here. All right, what do we have? The fifth seal?
Fourth seal.
fourth sealing.
Stopped at the third, but
But I
you,
think it's time.
I
think it's
know.
Time to go.
I know I feel badly. So we'll remember where we are. We've finished up verse 8. And we are moving on to verse 9, which is the fifth
the
seal.
fifth seal. yeah.
Right. So we'll finish 9 through the end, no doubt. We'll finish the end of chapter 7. And then we'll begin or chapter 6 rather, looking at chapter 7. These things are the seals of judgment, and it's not the only, the four horsemen. These seals here are not the only ones. There are more coming. So we're going to get into those when we finish up this 6th chapter. All right, guys, fantastic. When we will we'll continue on and keep reading in our in-between time, and when we get back together, we will hit the ground running.
I'm glad to
Right.
see you're feeling better, but I have a final question for you.
Yes.
There's a password for the lay reader section of the church website. Should I email Mary for that? Because I just wanted to look at the next reading, because I'm going to be working with you this weekend
Well,
at 8 a.m.
Hang on 1 second. Let me do this. I'm just say goodnight, but don't go away. Good night.
Later.
Stop your recording.
Good night.
too.